Hey, this is Jeffrey Ross, and welcome to Volume 2 of How I Became a DoorDasher. In today's video, we're going to be talking about some sensitive topics like drug addiction and things like that. So just be forewarned, it might get a little bit real. So in the 1990s, I had just met my first wife, Liz. And Liz and I had a baby, Candace. And I was 22, 23 years old and still working security, but was also transitioning into a new role being a taxi driver. As I was doing this in Boulder, Colorado, I also got introduced to drugs. Now, I had already been kind of what you would call a young casual drug user of, well, maybe I'll just put a list up on the screen of everything that I had tried. But in the early 90s, I was introduced to cocaine. And I did cocaine for probably about a decade and watched it gradually wreck my life. Now, since this is going to spill over into the aughts or the year 2000s, I'm just going to kind of talk about in the 90s what I was doing, because it was just a big mess for the most part. I was married and I had a baby, and I was working jobs like being a taxi driver. I actually started my own business. I started a courier company, and the courier company was actually relatively successful, even though I had nothing to show for it. That was a lot of the drugs. And by the late 90s, I realized that things weren't going well, so I sold the courier company and moved from Colorado to Nebraska. And it was at that point that I found a job where I started my career in life. I was working at a cable company called Cox Communications. A guy by the name of Doran hired me to be an engineer for him. Well, technically, a woman by the name of Sue actually hired me to come work for the company, and then Doran took me in as an engineer afterwards. Interesting story about Sue. She actually is the person who's responsible for introducing me to my second wife, which also happened in the 90s in Omaha, Nebraska. I didn't realize the hold that cocaine had on me at that time and how powerful the addiction was. I was a functional addict. I kept getting my paychecks, the house payments were being made, but ultimately it was all so tenuous. Anything could go wrong at any minute. And in fact, eventually things did go horribly wrong. And that's what I'm going to talk about in the next video in this series.